Hey folks, this is B from B Recovers from Binging, and today we're going to be talking about the mind-body connection and how trauma and shame are intertwined in that. So for me, my eating disorder is rooted in early childhood trauma. So down below in the links section, I put some links to some information and some books that I found really helpful in my journey, and I thought it was interesting to include some of them because they're no longer in vogue. They're from a couple of generations ago, but the information in them is just spectacular. So do check it out if anyone ever sees this channel. And feel free to leave in your comments stuff that you find really helpful, because I think that this is all evolving stuff and it's really interesting and it really does have an impact on our recovery. So because of that early childhood trauma, a lot of my fears are related to just being in a body. I know, like, when I was growing up in the 80s, I laugh just because I feel like everyone on YouTube was born like 2 weeks ago. But growing up in the 80s, sometimes if you saw, you're a kid and you're watching a talk show and there'd be a large woman there and she'd be trying to almost sort of like defend her right to exist to Sally Jessy Raphael, who was a talk show host way back in the day. And she'd say, "I'm scared of being in a small body because I was sexually abused." And the audience, half the audience would be like, "I get it, girl, I get it." And then the other half, you could see on their faces, that's just an excuse. And so, like, low metabolism, thyroid stuff, and sexual abuse seem to be the excuses for being fat in the 80s, and nobody gave a fuck. And it was like, oh well, get on with it. But the truth is, I think, and that's horrible. Let's first clear that up. But I think that we, and those of us who have been in much larger bodies, but even those of us who are in small bodies, it's not that we have a fear of being thin, it's not that we have a fear of being fat. We have a fear of being in an alive human body. We have a fear of being noticed. You could put me, like, I've been much thinner and was still afraid to get thinner. I've been fatter, I've been all the things, and every time it's always sort of like a grass is greener on the other side type of situation where I'm nervous and anxious about the opposite body. So when I think of thinness, for me, on the top layer of consciousness, no, but below, yes, I think vulnerable, unsafe, demure, can't speak up, quiet, what's the word, almost sort of like considering myself arm candy. Like, I don't have a job here, I'm just standing here and looking pretty. Because you can do that if you're thin. These are my stories to myself. I'm not saying that everyone thinks this way or that these are true stereotypes. And then when I think about being in my fatter body, I think about rebellion. Fuck you. I dare you. Invisible, yet so visible because you take up space that you're not quote unquote allowed to. Vulnerable, because not because your body is easily hurt, but because people easily want to hurt your body. And I think about having to fight for your right to exist. So those are the two extremes of thinness and fatness, and how I relate to both of those due to that trauma from childhood. When I also think about all of the stuff, I think about the diet or the restrict binge shame cycle. So for me, it's just like a lovely little circle that I'm always on. And I always think that sometimes people say, oh, so-and-so is a food addict, or that's an outdated term, but it's still getting thrown around out there. I don't think, just like I don't really like to use the word binge. I use it because it's common parlance, but like really to me it's reactive eating. And same thing with food addict. I don't think any of us are addicted to food, which is why OA didn't work for me, but Alcoholics Anonymous did. I was genuinely addicted to alcohol, and I have a problem with food, but it's not a food addiction. What I'm actually quote unquote addicted to, if you want to use that term, is the restrict, binge, shame cycle. Because I had so much trauma when I was a kid, and because it almost kind of like, and there's a lot of research kind of going around into the neuroscience of it, but I really feel like I can feel the groove in my brain of trigger, do. Like if I could just lift off my skull, I'm pretty sure I could see like a little racetrack going, and that would be how my brain got rewired, and that kind of, in my very unscientific terms, kind of explains why I'm stuck on that track, because it was etched in early and often, constantly, of beating myself up. And one of the things that I also noticed was that when I started getting help, and I knew I was stuck, and I knew that there was this track going on, and I didn't have the words for any of this then, but I, as I am wont to do, over-intellectualized it. So I would read books, I went to counseling, I would journal, I went to self-help groups, I went to internet forums, I did all the things, and it would be all here, very, very, very thinky. And when I was very large, I lived from the neck up, and then discovered running, and realized that I had been basically ignoring the wisdom in the other part of my body for pretty much, 15, 20 odd years, because it was a scary place to go. And that on top of that I'd been ignoring that wisdom, but I also didn't realize that this was a liar. It wasn't always telling me the truth, and I honestly didn't know that. I guess I thought that if you have a thought, and because our thoughts aren't like, they're not totally original or anything, so if I call myself a fat pig in my head, that's not a new original thought, and there will be plenty of people who will go, you are a fat pig, and say that and validate you in that way and treat you that way. So if I had a negative thought like I'm a fat pig, and there were plenty of people around me who would say, yep, you are, it never occurred to me that that was a lie. Do you understand what I'm saying? So all of this stuff just kind of self-perpetuated over and over and over, and there was no balancing factor, which I think the body is. The body is the balance. The body is pure experience and feeling. It can't tell itself a story, although I guess it can in terms of trauma. It seizes up and it has a physical reaction to stressors. So yeah, I'm gonna correct myself there. But I don't think that I was synced up with my body at all. So part of this journey, the second time around, because I have tried to work on my eating disorder stuff in the past multiple times, but this is kind of like the big one. Okay, we'll call this the third big one. I hadn't really incorporated the body piece, and I didn't feel safe incorporating the awareness of trauma, and I didn't feel safe talking about shame. I do now, and so therefore I am going to be working on some of those things. So I knew in this round of recovery, and actually what I should probably say is, this isn't like the third round in isolation, meaning that the first and the second time failed. They didn't fail. I got as recovered as I could get during those times, and I actually have grown leaps and bounds with it. So I just wanted to say that to myself mostly, and to anyone else who's done this a couple of times. Like, it's not an overnight process, it's not black and white, there's a continuum, and for many of us, we might be struggling with this for most of our lives, but we're gonna have to be completely compassionate to ourselves. So I knew that this time around, because I'm so dissociated from my body, that healing in my body would have to take place. So I have a couple of ways that I'm doing that. So the first thing that I'm doing is guided visualizations at night, and I'm kind of borrowing some stuff from the John Gabriel method, but not. So hear me out. Basically, what I found interesting in his visualizations, which I just recently found when I was kind of doing some research into things, is he talks a lot about it's safe to let go of some of your extra weight. It's safe to trust. It's safe, creating a sense of safety. And realizing that for a lot of us that there is that physical connection, the mind-body connection, which is often related to trauma, around our food and weight issues. So he also does some stuff about healthy food, this, that, and the other thing, and that's really not my bag right now. I'm dealing with the feelings and I'm dealing with all of the other stuff. But I'm gonna take his method and his style and just rewrite it more for myself and make it affirming for me. So when I have that done, I will link it, and anyone who wants to use it can. I don't have a particularly like ASMR-y voice, so I apologize in advance, but hopefully it could be of use to somebody. The second piece of what I'm doing in terms of mind-body recovery is a little more conventional. So I have some old running injuries, and I also wanted to give myself lots and lots of time to start getting some nutrition and getting some body repair happening after pregnancy with hyperemesis gravidarum, and then 4.5 months after postpartum with just being on liquids. So I'm, with my last pregnancy, I was already well into the gym by now and doing all of the things. Because of those running issues, I also have like complete lack of like the skeletal alignment got thrown out because one muscle's pulling this way, one's pulling the other way. It's an anterior pelvic tilt with some old knee stuff and like hip stuff and blah, blah, blah. So, and I have relaxin in my system, so my ligaments, and I'm hyper flexible to begin with, so everything's like popping in and out. So me trying to get back into like being a little gym bunny gal, even though I miss it because I actually really, really like lifting weights. Like I love it and I love running, but I am so physically out of whack right now that I would be crazy to go hit the gym without doing a ton of foundation work and really taking the time to take care of my body. So right now that means reconnecting my core and making sure that it's syncing up with all the other parts of my body, and then rebuilding the strength in my core. From there, I'm also doing some yin yoga, but even then I have to be really careful because I'm so flexible. It'll feel good in the moment and then it just undoes all the progress. So really taking things very slowly, so that I'm just doing like a pose for a day on either side, waiting a couple of days to see if it causes any sort of ramifications, and then moving on, because I've been in and out of physio and chiro lately. And then from there I'll know, my body will tell me, just like it did last time, okay. And I didn't listen last time, but right before I got pregnant with number 2, my body told me I'm ready to start running now, and I was like, it was great, injury-free, low mileage, but it was lovely. So my body will tell me again when it's ready. All right, thank you so much, and I will be back soon.